Welcome to Season 3 of the Robertson and Easterling podcast. I'm Matt Easterling.
And I'm Craig Robertson. Matt and I are board-certified family law attorneys with decades of combined experience serving Mississippians throughout our fine state.
In 2019, we began wondering if the struggles our firm deals with on a daily basis could be used to help the general public. And from there, the Robertson and Easterling podcast was born.
During the first 2 seasons, we had open and honest discussions with everyday people about their individual relationship journeys, some ending in heartbreak and others in redemption, but all with powerful stories to tell.
In Season 3, you will hear more of the same stories from other marriage and divorce survivors, as well as from our new co-hosts, Eva and Roane Hunter from Lifeworks Counseling. Eva and Roane are both licensed professional counselors, and we're excited to partner with them and hear the different perspective they're going to have for all of our listeners.
Speaking of listening, if you're new to our podcast and haven't heard Seasons 1 and 2, be sure to check them out on iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcast player. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy today's show. What you're about to hear is going to help. Everybody, welcome back to the Robertson and Easterling podcast. We are, as usual, sponsored by Lifeworks Counseling. And today I have as my co-host, my friend, Roane Hunter.
Glad to be back again and hosting with you, sitting on this side of the table.
I know. It's more fun when we get to ask the questions together as opposed to me cross-examining you.
Yeah, and you're kind of good at that.
Well, I've been doing it for a little bit. But introduce our guest today. I'm excited to have him.
Yes. So, man, we certainly are so excited. Today, we've got special guest Eli Machen with us. Eli, we usually just refer to him as Yoda. Eli's been around a long time. I'm not going to say he's old, but he's got a lot of wisdom and experience. Eli's gotten connected with us. I don't know. We connected with Eli, even I did back, years ago along the way when we lived in Atlanta. And then it's so funny in our journey and finishing all of our work and starting our practice. Now we actually have the privilege of getting to work with Eli and Jim Kress and doing our couples intensives and just, really kind of riding shotgun and watching them do their work. I mean, Eli truly is, he's kind of what I would call an artist. He is a master therapist, and Eli just has a wealth of knowledge and experience. I think he's done everything you can do in counseling world, from running mental hospitals and clinics and private practice, and then working with different people along the way. He does a lot of work up at On-Site outside of Nashville, helped develop some of their programs. Same thing at Bethesda Workshops in Nashville, really developed that program along with Mark Laser, who some of our listeners, all of them, 12 of them, may know.
No, we have dozens of listeners.
Yes, but Eli's just, he's been around, and certainly we are grateful for just his friendship, his mentorship, and certainly for me, just him as a father figure, fathering and brothering. We do these special focus men's trips. The special spiritual focus is called fishing.
Yes.
It's very, very serious. We actually do some work on those trips, but fishing is the focus. And then Eli's been a part of even our men's community here, has been on the trips with us, on our big men's adventure trips out of our men's coaching weekends, and certainly he's gotten connected with and is just a part of our community as well. So, man, we are just so glad to have you as a guest on the podcast. And I'm going to shut up and I'm going to let Craig interrogate Eli, cross-examined, if you will.
Eli, man, give our listeners a little background. Tell us about your work and your life.
Well, first of all, I'm just grateful to be here with you guys and some of the things that we can talk about today. So thanks for inviting me to be a part of this. My background is that I started way back in the 70s, realizing that I felt like I was destined to be a counselor. And so slowly worked my way through school. I wanted to combine my spirituality with counseling. So I combined seminary with my graduate work at University of Connecticut. So that I started out with a lot of head knowledge and not much experience, but with a lot of big vigor and passion. I think that where I got into the field of sexual addiction and so forth was when I had just finished working as a senior vice president of a mental health company, national mental health company, and decided to go ahead and launch my own hospital program and full continuing care. And so I did that outside of Tampa, Clearwater, Tampa area. And I had 2 hospital programs there with 8 outpatient offices, community mental health center, And as we began to continue to work with clients, we kept seeing this odd behavior come through. And we couldn't figure out what it was. It was combined with depression, and the psychiatrist was saying this is some kind of obsessive behavior, and it was around sex. And so I didn't know what I was dealing with. I just thought, well, just stop it. That didn't work. But I didn't know. And so I got a call from a friend who said, there's a gentleman that's coming to do a conference for us. Would you be interested in being a part of that? And it's on sexual addiction. I thought, well, that sounds like something I probably ought to get to. So I did. And I went down to see Pat Carnes, and then later went through a training with Patrick at Golden Valley. And that's where I started back in 1989. And we built our own first Christian inpatient program there. It was a couple of years later, I kept running into this other gentleman his name was Dr. Mark Laser. And we're working there at Golden Valley with Pat Carnes. And I finally convinced him after a year or two to come work for me and let's build this program up. We started doing that. And then right around 94, psychiatric hospitalization was going down the tubes. Insurance was not paying. Psychiatric hospitals were selling out or closing. And so Mark and I decided to take the program, condense it down to a 4.5 day program and take it on the road. And so we did. And so in 95, we started traveling and doing these intensive workshops all over the country.
And that's the Faithful and True Ministries, right?
Well, back then it was not Faithful and True. It was, we didn't really have an official name for it. We were just out there doing it. We worked through different organizations. Sometimes we worked through the American Family Association for a long time, and they promoted it, and we traveled with that. And then they decided to not continue that. And so I forget what year now, 98, I think it was, they stopped doing that. And so we basically took it on the road for a year or so. And then we landed in Nashville, Tennessee, and took it to Bethesda, which then became, the Bethesda workshops for men, for couples. And Marnie Free was already doing workshops for women with sexual addiction. And so it kind of complemented the whole thing. You wouldn't have any way to know this, but Mark Laser was actually an expert witness for me in a case in the early 2000s. I represented this young guy who had looked at some porn, and his wife didn't know what to do with it. And so he ended up going to some of the workshops that probably you were a part of, but definitely Mark Laser was a part of. And the word sexual addiction, for a long time, I'm probably one of the few lawyers in all of Mississippi who's seen porn played in open court. And it was in that case that Mark testified in many, many, many years ago. So for our listeners who don't know much about sexual addiction, give a baseline definition. Patrick Carnes' definition was when somebody has a pathological relationship with a behavior around sexual behaviors. So it'd be, basically a pathological relationship with sex and any form thereof. We'll break that down a little further, Eli. So pathological, we've got people like Roane listening to our podcast that big words like pathological. I think what I often say is this. It's the confusion that sex and behaviors around sex, without trying to simplify this too much, is it confused with intimacy. And I usually refer to sexual addiction as an intimacy disorder. And it's more about a person not really self-loathing, not really liking who they are. They hate their life, and they have in their mind that they were somebody else, with somebody else, doing something else, that they'd be happy, that somehow or other it would be better than the life they live. So there's a lot of self-loathing and self-shame along with the sexual addiction, outside of fetishes and other things that go along with that. But I think basically it's behaviors around in relationships or sex that end up destroying people's lives, their soul, their spirit, their hearts. Relationships through objectivity as opposed to intimacy. You mentioned when you started in Clearwater, Florida. What year was that when you had the program? We actually didn't start. We started doing it in '89, but we didn't have the official program until '90. And then Mark came down somewhere around in late '91. And I should have been there in 1990, not working with you, but as a patient. But, back then, as you know, there was nothing out there. I mean, Patrick Carnes was it. And then you guys probably were, not far behind him. No. So really,
it's one of the things with Eli is just, you always say he's one of the pioneers in this work. And, another piece of, work that you really helped even develop and other therapists use the model today is working with partners of sexual betrayal and dealing with the betrayal trauma. So just touch on that briefly, if you would.
Sure. We had some spouses start calling in and saying, our husbands are coming back from these workshops and they're acting different and they're talking different and they get in their little groups. And it's like, okay, what are you going to do for us? What about us? And so, I am at this point an unrecovering spouse, and I have no clue what to do. But we started building a program. So we put together an intensive program in 95 to start working with partners. Now, that was the beginning. I made a lot of mistakes in the early days of calling them codependency. I got stoned twice. No, not with weed. I mean, with rocks. And it's like, so it was a process of us learning the whole thing. I mean, the work around partners and spouses of sex addicts is still going on today. I think it's still evolving. And it's come a long way since those early days. So it started there, and I didn't really get into my own recovery until 99.
Talk about that piece a little bit, because I know that was a huge, all of us, I always tell people, when you're looking for a therapist, one of the first questions you need to ask them is, how much work have you done? How much time have you spent sitting on that couch? And so certainly talk about that part a little bit in doing your own work and how that came about.
Well, I didn't have any idea I needed to be on the couch. I wasn't one that had problems. That was the delusion. It's just like, I thought I was taking the high road. I thought that I was the one who had it together, and I wasn't doing stuff that was inappropriate. And so what was my problem? And so I think I suffered from the lack of really understanding deep within, some of my own need for the work. And so that my codependency, the other dynamics that may or may not be connected with a partner with sexual addiction. And I know I'm using these terms. Anytime I think we get caught up in a relationship with an addict of any kind, it has a huge impact on us. And so that's kind of the key thing, is that I started my own recovery in 99. I started going to Al-Anon because at that time I couldn't find an S-Anon. I went to Al-Anon, I got a therapist, and it wasn't too many sessions, and I began to realize, why in the world did they not tell us in graduate school that this is something we should be doing? It would have saved years of my life. It would have been different. It was amazing. It's totally different to sit on the couch rather than being the therapist in a room. It was like, it was one of the greatest things I ever did for myself.
Amen.
Eli, how does that play out in a marriage, though? Talk from a practical standpoint on, the addict and the partner. How does that play out in most marriages?
Well, oftentimes the addict, the one that's either gotten busted or he or she has shared that I've got this addiction, or maybe they don't even admit that they have an addiction, but they got a problem that keeps coming up. And it's like there's an awakening that takes place, and it's like suddenly you realize that you're not really married to the person you thought you were married to, and you're not sure how much of your marriage is really real. You don't have any way to judge how much of this relationship truly existed the way I thought it did. And so I'm not sure how I'm married to. I'm not sure how much of the marriage I was really a part of. And because of that dynamic and the way the brain works with our own self-esteem and self-image, is that we then begin to question who in effect we are. And so it's that struggle to suddenly lose context of who we are. We've lost our me. And oftentimes we've done behaviors that are throwing ourselves under the bus, putting ourselves behind, trying to keep the marriage, trying to be enough in the marriage, doing a lot of kind of dysfunctional behavior in the sense of thinking, at least I did, thinking I'm doing the right thing here. This is what I'm supposed to do, and the pain I go through is just the suffering I got to go through. So we all get weird thinking around that, and it's hard for us to understand we're part of the problem. It's just really hard because we're not doing that stuff, but we're running around we put ourselves last. We run around focused and obsessed over what our partners are doing or not doing, and who they're doing it with, or where they are, or what's going on. And we lose our life somewhere along that process. Now, it's not about us anymore. I think that's why it's so hard for us to realize, why do I need help? And then the whole difficult process of now trying to figure out how am I going to ever trust again? That's like, how can I ever know? And that's a double-edged thing. And it's a program I've put together. I've now got it on YouTube for anybody that wants it. But the point being is like, how do I even trust me? And I think I didn't realize that at first until I went further down. I was thinking, I don't trust anybody. I don't trust any women. They're all going to da-da-da-da. And I kind of generalized my fear, my anxiety, and my trust, or lack of trust, there it is, across the board. And really, the major problem I needed to start with is learning to trust me. Could I make really good decisions? Could I really know reality as it is? Or do I rewrite it? Or do I only look at what I want to look at and deny what's really right there in front of me? As the sober I got in my own recovery, my ability to see reality and embrace it and say, okay, this is what's real. The further I got in that, the crazier I realized I was. Looking straight at grass and saying it was some other color than green, because it was easier for me to see it that way than to see the truth.
I've heard you talk about it, but the idea that, when a partner says, when all hell breaks loose and everything comes out into the light, and the partner says, well, I had no idea that this was going on. And I think that's kind of where you talk about the intimacy disorder, because it's like if this other person is over there in the bushes, not showing up, and you don't know that they're not at the show-up place, that's what we call an intimacy disorder.
Right. If I'm not, you've heard me talk, Roane, about the show-up place, and it's like, it's easy for me to look across the other side of the show-up place and say my spouse or partner never showed up. But then, like you're saying, why didn't I know? Well, guess what? I wasn't there either. Now, and I think that's the huge piece there, is that why do we get buffaloed? Is because I didn't know I wasn't showing up, and I didn't know I was connecting intimately with somebody or whatever else, or accepting it not being that way. And so I think that's a huge piece of us as partners, is to learn how do I know I'm showing up? What do I need to do to show up? What does it mean to me to be authentic? And I think one of the key things, I say it over and over to couples today, safety is the most important thing. If I'm not going to feel safe, I'm not going to show up. So I think that the first part, and most partners need to know, is this relationship going to make the distance or not? Are you committed to this or not? Are you going to stay? Are you going to work your program or not? Because this doesn't feel safe if that doesn't happen. And it's hard for the partner or spouse to show up vulnerably when they're not sure they really got somebody with them at the show place that's going to do the distance.
And when we're talking about the show up place, and I really like the sound of that is where one steps into an environment where they can be vulnerable and where they can be real and where they can be transparent. Help me and our listeners understand, what is the show up place?
Well, it's any place that's like, Roane and I have a show up place because we're friends, we're colleagues, we work together. And so, it's like we have boundaries around our relationship, or with things that are kosher and not, the things that are acceptable between the two of us. And so in that safety of that relationship, the safer we feel, the closer we get. It would be that true with my wife and I. We focused big time on building safety in our relationship first. And as safety came along, the ability for me to be in this show-up place, this place where I come to a relationship, whether it's with my son, whether it's with my wife, or whether it's with my friends. It's like, if we have the boundaries in place, we have it defined. Okay, this is our relationship that we're going to have. And so as that relationship is defined, then we have boundaries and there's that safety. Then I come to the relationship as transparent as I can. And that's me showing up. And I think my job in my recovery is that I'm to show up. My job is to show up with my clients, with my friends and colleagues, with my wife, and with my son and children. And so, if that makes any sense. So it's however I come to a relationship. And depending on how transparent we're willing to be, depends on how much I'm showing up.
Hey guys, this is Roane Hunter. At Lifeworks, our couples intensive is focused on developing healthy relational dynamics and true intimacy. Couples don't have to have it all together or even be sure they want to stay together. Couples that have been on the brink of divorce with papers filed have not only stayed together, but they have built something new from the rubble left behind. Real issues are addressed using experiential therapy and a systemic framework for ongoing growth and healing. Couples develop a growth plan that emphasizes personal growth and inviting the other to show up, connect, and journey together. Lifeworks Counseling, the science and soul of connection.
Hey, I'm Matt Easterling. Thanks for listening to a podcast. I hope you're finding these stories insightful and comforting. If you relate to anything you've heard so far, or if you just want more information, you can request a consultation right from our website by completing a simple online form. Of course, you're also free to just give us a call. Family law is all we do. As experts, we have the information and advice you need to move forward, whatever that may look like for you. We would love to be in your corner. Until then, sit back, relax, and enjoy part 2 of today's show.
Well, help me understand a little bit more, because you talked about the partner. And what our listeners who aren't as familiar with some of this vernacular and language is the partner of an affair or of an addict. And you talk about that person not being at the show up place either. What does that mean, Eli?
Well, if someone is acting out and objectifying, then they're not being authentic and real themselves. In other words, I believe that it's like if I objectify someone, I've already objectified myself. I'm not. I don't want to be who I am. I want to be somebody else. I want to with somebody else. And so, once we begin to objectify ourselves and others, we're not showing up authentic. We're not being intimate. We're just totally. We're vacant. So we can be in a relationship and not real, not honest, not transparent, not vulnerable. And so a person could live with us a long time if they're willing to accept that level of relationship and never really know us. And so that's the piece that's like, you can't do both. And the confusion is that a lot of guys I've worked with in the past have said, well, why can't I do porn? Why can't I do this? You know, I could show up with my wife. And I said, do they know that? Do they know you? No. Well, then you're not really transparent. You're not really being vulnerable. You're hiding. And so I guess that's what I mean by that.
So, Eli, one of the things, just I hear you talk about it, we talk about it, you know, the 3 things that kill intimacy, kill relationship, the secrets, silence, and judgment. And when that happens, you know, it's going to kill it. You're not going to be able to show up. And so being transparent, being open, beginning to talk about things that need to be talked about, and then not getting judged at the show-up place. And ultimately, when those things are not there, that's true intimacy.
Eli, I'm going to ask you a divorce lawyer question. So why do people have affairs? Why does it happen? Why, our listeners are, they know I'm a divorce lawyer and I've got this podcast with the marriage counselor. And so I don't know how weird that is, but break it down, man.
I'm cheaper. Yeah.
That's very true. Yeah. We had a financial planner on the podcast, and he said the biggest financial event that most people are involved in is the breakdown of a marriage, is a divorce. I don't care if you're the founder of Amazon, many multi-million-dollar transactions as he was involved in. A divorce is the single biggest financial transaction. But just boil it down just as simply as you can. Why do people cheat? Why do people have affairs?
Well, that's what I was saying earlier. They're discontent. I think that Roane brought up an issue around shame. And shame always comes with a message of a negative message of who you are. And so most of the time, affairs happen long before the relationship. And what I mean by that is the roots, the seeds of an affair have usually started years before the affair ever starts. And so an affair just doesn't typically, I'm not saying general, I'm not trying to speak generally because there's always exceptions somewhere. But an affair, you typically is not, if I have a client that comes in and says I had an affair, well, it doesn't take me long to root out that there's probably a history. It goes all the way back to something in junior high school or thereabouts, early life. And so the seeds of that and the sense of what would make me happy and what would fulfill me, or it would dispel the lie of shame, is this person, this relationship, this sexual acting out, the person that they're looking at in the pornography. And so then they look across the street or look across a room and they say, if I had this person, then I would feel better about myself. It would be this, if I could have an affair with this person, then it would make me feel so much different about me. And so it never does, but that's the lie. And so it's a failure to accept the fact of who we are and embrace that.
I've been a divorce lawyer now for 20 years, and I've been telling people most of that time that an affair is usually a symptom of the disease, not the disease itself. And what I'm hearing you say is the seed, the root, the virus, to use my disease analogy, is this uneasiness with oneself. I don't like myself, and so I am seeking after something that I think is going to be more fulfilling or something that's going to help me medicate the fact that I don't like myself.
Self-loathing is a sense that because of the stories in my head, prior trauma, prior shaming, environmental influences, is that I don't like me. Matter of fact, I hate myself or I loathe myself. And so that's easy for me to then project into the relationship and say, well, it's my relationship's fault. Or, so if I was with somebody else, being somebody else, doing something else, then that would tell me that I'm okay, that I'm all right, that I'm trying to get validation of who I am externally. And so therefore the affair. I've had conversations with men over the years. Well, I'm really happy in my marriage. I just do this on the side. I says, well, okay, what's on the side that's not going to give you what you want in your marriage? And so he lists off this long list. He says, so you're saying that this means you're satisfied, that there is something completing in this relationship? Well, no. And so finally we get down to the truth that it's about when they say I'm dissatisfied in this relationship or with this partner that I'm with, or the spouse, it's really about them. And they want their partner or spouse to change that. And so if they can't, then, okay, it must be out there somewhere. Now, and bottom line, I'm sure we said this earlier, this is really an intimacy disorder. And if I can't connect with myself, my true self, my authentic self, and have an intimate, dynamic relationship with myself and be okay with that, then I can't then connect with another. But I'm going to project that on somebody else's fault. So it's like, okay, I'm just with the wrong person. That's why. And so that's the dynamic that I think draws and pushes that whole thing.
Which creates this behavior that we act out and we hide and we lose that intimate connection with our spouse and that vulnerability with our spouse, which is what is the foundation of a fulfilling relationship anyway.
It's like when we're acting out, the shame of acting out, whatever that is, just reinforces the shame that's already there. And it's so counterproductive because it just produces more, and then we want to pursue more. Comfort, medicate, fix it. And it's just a perpetual cycle.
That's what you're describing then, is the addiction cycle.
That's what it is.
And so in the desire that one has to medicate the shame, they create more of it.
Yep. And the shame is the driver so often.
So Eli, I'm very interested in the piece of the partner though, because so many times I'll have a person who comes into my office and maybe they went to a counselor's office or maybe they didn't, and they come into my office and the other person's affair is in their mind and in their heart the only thing that's wrong, and therefore you explained it before, but they it's their problem, fix them. They're the cause of this, but what I'm hearing you say is that's not always exactly how it happens.
You're asking me about how we choose and choose a partner and somebody that we have in a relationship. And then we turn around and blame that partner for not doing what we had hoped would change our world or our life. And the dynamic is that I'm going to find somebody out there that knows how to do the dance I've learned to do in life. So if I grew up in an unhealthy environment, with unhealthy attachment relationships, then I'm going to find somebody that's going to be the same way. That's so that we can dance the same dance. And so if I'm unhealthy, I'm going to find unhealthy. If I grew up in a home, and I'll walk right past healthy all day long. They won't interest me. They're not something that's going to flip my switch. They're not dangerous enough. They're not needy enough. They're not because that doesn't fit my dance. Now, if I grew up in a different environment, a different home, where there was a lot of healthy boundaries and there was a healthy nurturing and caring and attachment, then I'm going to walk right past the unhealthy, because I'm going to be drawn to the healthy so that we can dance the dance that I know. So we have this saying, oftentimes we'll say, is that healthy and unhealthy, healthy and healthy can live together, and oftentimes unhealthy and unhealthy live together. It's not very pretty, but they do. But rarely will ever healthy and unhealthy engage in a relationship, or if they do, stay in that relationship. And so that's that dynamic, because maybe certain things attracted you to this person, but then y'all don't know how to do this dance. And so if either of those partners don't choose to move towards healthy, then what happens is that they don't make it. That's kind of that dynamic. It's like I'm looking for somebody to deal and go through repeating the trauma that I grew up in, because I know it. And so it's like, okay, I know this trauma. We call that trauma repetition.
As we're closing out this episode today, let's give some hope to the couples that are listening to this. I mean, you talk about unhealthy and unhealthy can be in relationship with one another, and healthy can be in relationship with one another. How does a couple get there? To talk about the roadmap to recovery.
You talked about what's the hope for a couple that finds themselves, they're in a relationship and it's really dysfunctional. It's like, it's very unhealthy. Whether there's infidelity going on or not, it's just unhealthy. Now, if this couple says, okay, we were wounded in a family, in a community early on, and being isolated in ourselves, we're not doing anything but staying dysfunctional. So if this couple is willing to, both individuals in this coupleship are willing to reach outside of themselves and look for help, then the chances of them achieving a relationship that they really, really long for, and what I think we've been created and built for, is that's their hope. And so one would be is that they get into counseling. They're dealing with individual wounds and trauma in their life that are impeding their ability to show up, be vulnerable and intimate. Then as they get into, okay, we know our dance as a couple is dysfunctional and painful and hurtful. We don't want to continue this, but we don't know how enough fat to get out of this. Well, then have a couples counselor teach you the skills to build and mentor you into a relationship that you never thought was even possible, that you may never have experienced. Now, also, we teach oftentimes is that you can't heal alone. Healing takes place, wounding takes place in some kind of community, healing takes place in community. And we've not been designed to heal in isolation. So having support groups, having friends that are in recovery and moving in the direction that we want to be moving in, there's a synergism and also a hope provided and empathy, which is really important in the healing process, is somebody looks at you across the room and says, I get you, I've been there, and there's hope. And then you got this Me Too factor in the sense that there is this, somebody out there understands me and gets me, and I'm not alone with this. And so that's why in recovery, we encourage the 12 steps, support groups, therapy groups, community in which everybody is healing.
Right. I like to tell people, and I think it's true, that if a person, let's say there's been a discovery and they end up in my office or they end up in Roane's office or they end up in your office, I tell them that it's as if they're standing at the foothills of two equally complicated mountains to climb. And both of them are extremely difficult, and their lives are going to be very different on the other side of those. But what I'm hearing you say is for people to experience wholeness and for people to experience recovery, both partners have to journey over that mountain together.
Yes, you talk about two mountains here that we have to climb. One is the divorce side and one is the recovery side. And yes, either way, I mean, it's a tough go. It's tough on the children. It's tough on everybody that's around it. So you got to make a decision which mountain you're going to climb. Now, I'll say this, that, for those couples who decide that we're going to climb the mountain of reconciliation and healing as a couple, they find when they get to the top, or at least close to the top, that there's a level of glory and experience that they never thought was possible. Is it a climb? Yes, it's a climb. Will it continue to work on that relationship from now on? Probably. To ever reach the apex of that mountain? I don't know. But because there's always room for improvement. But the brighter the sun shines, the cleaner the air, the more the environment, the awesomeness of a relationship that achieves that makes the climb worth it.
Eli, man, thanks for connecting with us today. Tell our listeners where I know that you've got lots of resources available online. Tell our listeners where they might find a little more information about the work that you do. I know that I've seen some of your YouTube videos, so tell our listeners where they can connect with your work.
Well, you asked me where my videos go. You can get some of this information videos. I've got 50 plus videos on YouTube. The channel is Show Up 365, all one word, Show Up 365. I've taken all my videos and put them up there for free to access. Some you will see in playlist, and some are just, individual videos. You take your pick, but it's. I think you see that part of that was designed to help couples rebuild trust in their life and their relationship when there's been betrayal.
Man, Eli, thanks a lot for spending this time with us. We really appreciate you.
I enjoyed this. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
You've been listening to the Robertson Easterling podcast. Thanks for tuning in.
If you need our help, we're here for you. You can request a consultation from our website 24 hours a day. It takes less than 5 minutes. If you like our show, subscribe today on Spotify, iTunes, or your favorite podcast player so you can be one of the first to know when our next episode drops. You can also join us on social media. We're on all the major platforms, including Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Have a great rest of your day, and remember, there is nothing wrong with arming yourself with information. On behalf of the Robertson Easterling family, thanks for spending time with us.
This is Roane Hunter. At Lifeworks, our counselors seek to integrate healthy, faith-based principles with sound clinical skills. Whether you're struggling in a relationship or have feelings that hinder your ability to be all you were created to be, one of our trained counselors can help. We seek to partner with you as our client to find the freedom to live the life God intended for you. We offer our experience, strength, and hope to promote healthy relationships built on intimacy and trust. Lifeworks Counseling, the science and soul of connection.
This podcast is not a substitute for an attorney. All information is being provided as a general reference and public service. Listening to this podcast does not create a professional relationship with Robertson Easterling or Lifeworks Counseling. This podcast may be considered advertising under applicable rules, and free background information is available upon request. For more information, please visit our website, robertson.ms.